Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle McNichol. I'm General Counsel here at Neumann University, and I'm the Director for the Center for Leadership. I'm so very excited for today's event, Protecting Pennsylvania Pets, Eliminating Animal Cruelty in Pennsylvania. We are live streaming today, so please feel free to go to our website, which is www.nucenter4leadership.com, and this will be live streamed. It will also be available as a training tool on our website if you'd like to go back and look at it again in the future, as well as all of the materials that we have. Feel free to print those as well. We're here at a Franciscan institution, and if you actually had a moment to take a look around our campus, you would be able to see that we have a statue of St. Francis. And a brief quote from St. Francis, and I ask everyone to indulge me on this. All things of creation are children of the Father, and thus brothers of man. God wants us to help animals if they need help. Every creature in distress has the same right to be protected. And that's St. Francis of Assisi, and we have a statue to him as well, surrounded by animals. So that's something that I can see and feel from all of the folks that are here today. So I'm very excited at this time to introduce our district attorney, Petty Copeland. Okay.
Good afternoon. I began my career as a prosecutor 27 years ago. I was a freshly minted lawyer right out of law school, and I was offered a job as an assistant district attorney in the Delaware County District Attorney's Office. I had worked there throughout my third year in law school, and frankly, I loved the job. In my first few days on the job, I saw the violence committed in our community. My eyes blinded at that, and my heart opened to the victims. And I knew at that point in time that I had chosen the right path in life, and for me, frankly, there was no turning back. I wanted to be a voice for the victim, to stand by their side, to give them strength, to speak loud, clear. And when the victim had no voice, I would be there fighting for them to ensure that they received justice. I began in the pretrial unit, and for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is, it's basically the med school equivalent of being on rotation in every single unit of the hospital. So you get a little bit of everything, and you get it really fast-paced. You're running around handling criminal court proceedings all throughout the county, robberies, assaults, drug trafficking. And in between court hearings, we had duty in the office one day a week, where anyone who came into the office who had questions or concerns, whether a member of the public or law enforcement, we were there to address it. I had duty one such day when a gentleman from the SPCA came into the office and shared with me a heart-wrenching case about a horse who was emaciated and locked in a barn. The SPCA officer was armed with every shred of evidence, location, witnesses, his own description. But it was the pictures that spoke 1,000 words. I don't need to describe them to you. They were exactly as horrific as you imagine. That day, the SPCA officer and I were on a mission to ensure justice for that beautiful, helpless horse. And we didn't stop until he was safe and sound. I gave the SPCA officer my cell phone and told him to call me whenever he had a case of suspected cruelty. And that day began our friendship and the many years of hard work to make sure that all our county animals had a voice and were protected. But sadly, despite all our efforts, the laws on the books back then were woefully lacking. I'm talking about 1992. Abusers faced, frankly, summary offenses, essentially a fine. Fast forward 27 years. In January 2018, I was appointed district attorney of Delaware County, and thankfully, we have come so far. We needed to. I truly believe that how we treat animals shows who we are as a society. How you treat the defenseless is representative of your nature and the soul and the dignity that you have for life. In my office, we have an animal cruelty prosecution unit, which provides prosecutorial consistency throughout county-wide, and we work closely with vital partners, such as the Humane Society and their police officers, such as our animal control officers, such as our dog wardens and game wardens, and the many police officers throughout the county. To hold people accountable for their actions, we not only rely on members of our team, but the community at large, who are often the individuals who first report these cases to us. Not only do we need to protect animals from abuse and neglect, but evidence shows there is a strong link between animal abuse and violent crimes against people, particularly children and domestic violence. Animal cruelty is frankly one of the earliest and most dramatic indicators that an individual may be developing a pattern of seeking power and control through the abuse of others. For animal control officers in the audience, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Abuse of animals in a home is a loud and clear warning sign that others in the household may be in danger. The link between violence to people and violence to animals is well documented. Violence to animals is a predictor that the abuser may become violent to people, and studies time and time again show that animal abuse is more prevalent in homes that experience child abuse and domestic violence, and 43% of school shooters have animal abuse in their background. Sadly, often animal abuse crimes have a nexus to mental illness, with 68% of American households having a pet. The potential for a connection between animal abuse and human violence is prevalent where pets are more likely to be used as tools of manipulation by the abuser. That has the potential to come into play in a variety of means, whether getting caught in the crossfire of violence towards people, or targeting a pet to gain silence or compliance from human victims. Sadly, families and communities are at risk when animal abuse is ignored or unreported alongside family violence. As a district attorney's office, we have begun having a conversation among professionals who have worked in the field to identify gaps and needs in the animal abuse investigation field. Just last week, we had a case where an autopsy was performed, and I'm using layman's terms, on an animal who had passed away due to neglect. And one of the areas we noticed was additional testing that needed to be done in order to close those loopholes in a criminal justice system unprepared to deal with these kinds of issues. Our goal is to collaborate and partner with other professionals and other disciplines so we can recommend and use best practices across the county to document and investigate animal abuse crimes, prevent abuse, and hold perpetrators accountable, because that's what we should be doing. Assistant District Attorney Tom Laurie leads our unit in the office. While I was a brand new lawyer, when I found my passion for prosecuting these types of cases, ADA Laurie, with 32 years of experience under his belt as a prosecutor, has handled many of these cases over the course of the years, and he prosecutes most of the cases himself, from beginning to end. Currently, in our office, we have 5 animal cruelty or neglect cases pending. They range from people not providing crucial medical care for their pets to starving their pets to death. It is incredibly hard to wrap your head around the concept that people can watch their pets literally die before their eyes, and to comprehend how people can treat a loving, defenseless animal like that. The recently enacted Libre's law, which I'm sure you'll be hearing a little bit about this afternoon, has greatly helped holding people accountable for their actions. An animal control officer said it best when he said, "It won't stop cruelty, but it will put an emphasis on the importance of justice for their suffering." The laws are a recognition of their pain and what they deserve. Despite how far we've come, we still have far to go, and Victoria's law will get us there. It's sponsored by Senator Killian and others, and it will help greatly. Putting an increased emphasis on animal abuse crimes recognizes that the same behaviors that harm animals harm humans. Early intervention, to the importance of animals in our society. We're surrounded by animals helping humans. Canines helping police detect drugs. Canines helping farm marshals sniff out arson-causing agents. Dogs helping detect out electronics hidden by child predators. Animals helping lead the way for the blind. Cats providing comfort to the elderly. And providing us every day with love. These are but a few of the ways that they help us. We have a moral and ethical responsibility to help them. Today, the day after one of the most somber days in our history, I'm sure all of you remember what I remember seeing, which is the images of the rubble of the Twin Towers. And atop that rubble, along with the police, the firefighters, and EMS, were dogs. They were everywhere you looked, helping us to save and find victims, helping us locate remains. They worked tirelessly alongside their handlers. Animals give us their all, whether it's to comfort us at home or on tragic days like September 11th, all while asking for nothing in return. We owe so very much to them. I will close with one note. Please remember, if you see something, say something. Report animal cruelty to your local animal humane officer. And if you don't have one in your area, please contact your local police department or the Pennsylvania State Police.
Thank you, District Attorney Copeland, and thank you so much for all that you are doing and your department is doing on this very important topic. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Kristen Tullo. Kristen is the Pennsylvania State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. She had initially served as a corporate outreach intern. I liked this, I'm sorry, so I have to mention it, for the Farm Animal Protection Campaign at the state legislature, developing her connections and volunteering on Humane Lobbying Day before taking on this role. Most recently, she led public voices in raising awareness of animal welfare and carrying the momentum through the passage of House Bill 1238, incorporating Lieber's Law. We're so very appreciative of that, and please, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And I just have to applaud DA Copeland for a quote she said. I mean, the entire presentation was amazing. But she said, all our animals, we won't stop until all our animals have a voice and are protected. And that is just truly a testament to how a community can come together around animal welfare issues, and truly a big round of applause for DA Copeland. And I am so excited to be here to talk with you about Victoria's Law. And this is introduced by Senator Tom Killian, who's in the center here, and we have just been delighted to work with him on this legislation, and there's so much public support for this bill. So we're going to talk a little bit about the details of the legislation, but before we get started, I wanted to share Victoria's story. Victoria was a German Shepherd that was bred at a Pennsylvania puppy mill for 10 years. We estimate that she produced 150 to 200 puppies before she was rescued and taken in for the last year of her life, where she spent in the comforts of a loving home. The hardest part about Victoria's story is that she had a condition called degenerative myelopathy, which is a condition that can be passed down to your puppies. So those 150 to 200 puppies that she produced went on to be sold at our pet stores and online, have potentially that same condition. So it's an example of what the cycle is with dogs who are coming from puppy mills, and we're going to talk a little bit about the support that we have from veterinarians in our state who are showing their support for this legislation because of the medical issues that they treat on a regular basis. So Victoria's spirit lives on in each of us as we work to end this legislation. She unfortunately did pass away about just a few months ago. And so we will continue working until Victoria's Law is enacted. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of the puppy mill problem in Pennsylvania so you have an idea of the scope of this issue in our state. And then we'll talk about legislative efforts and how everyone here can be a voice to stop animal cruelty by enacting Victoria's law. Before I get started, I'm often asked about how I got started in animal welfare. So this is me with my dog Blanca growing up. And so from the time I can remember, I mean, my mom will go back and tell you that when we grew up on the bayou, I was the kid who was saving minnows when everyone else was trying to fish. And so my entire life, I've just wanted to be a voice for animals, and every single day I wake up immensely grateful that I'm able to help give a voice to Pennsylvania's animals, and I'm inspired by the work that everyone does in our state to support animal protection legislation. So a little bit about me and a little bit about the Humane Society of the United States. I just wanted to mention that we are most often known for our work to protect dogs and cats, but the logo in the center is my favorite part of working for this organization. There are 19 different animals in our collage, and it's just representative of the different animals that we work to protect. And this is just 4 areas that we focus on. So we have massive efforts in rescue and direct care. We do public awareness and education just to talk about these issues and explain why they're important to be taken seriously. And then the area that I work in most often is the public policy and enforcement area, and I'm so proud of Pennsylvania for passing Libre's Law, the most historic animal protection legislation in our state history, and now we're going to pass Victoria's Law. And then corporate reform, and these are our 4 areas of primary focus. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on that, and before I go to the next slide, I'm interested to hear, why is giving legislative voice of protection important to animals? I mean, does anybody have thoughts on, why do we want to give a voice to animals? What's that? They don't have a voice. They can't speak for themselves. How about, that's a great answer. How about anybody else? To stop the cruelty, because when legislation is enacted, that leads to concrete changes. How about one more? Barbara?
As a species who dominates the planet, I think we have a duty to share compassion
Exactly.
with the other species that share this planet with us.
You're
I look
exactly
at
right.
that as my brothers and sisters.
That is a beautiful response, and I think that we've hit on the top 3. So we are their voice. Animals can't speak for themselves, so it's a responsibility that we have to help give a voice of protection to them. And then the concrete changes that come from enacting legislation like Libre's Law, like Victoria's Law, that is long lasting. And the final thing, when we have forums like this sparks public dialogue, and that's my favorite thing about animal protection. We have Libre, the Boston Terrier. This is the photo found of him the day he was at the farm, so this is original photo. He was left for dead, and this dog's miraculous recovery is what sparked public dialogue, calling on our General Assembly to improve our animal cruelty and neglect laws. And that is what led to the most significant strengthening of our cruelty laws in the last 30 years. And now, Libre, nowadays. Oh, good. Barbara's giving a round of applause for that. So laws matter, and the reason laws matter is we were once ranked 36th in our animal cruelty laws prior to Libre's Law. We were the most improved state with the passage of Libre's Law and moved up 21 positions. We are now within the reach of the top 10 states in our nation. And so by enacting Victoria's Law, that puts us one step closer to number 1, although we want all states to be number 1. We are moving in that direction, and we're going to get it done with Senator Killian's leadership. So I wanted to just talk briefly about the Pennsylvania Spca. Did just maybe a show of hands, the 55 dogs that were rescued, did most people see that? Show of hands. That was from an unlicensed puppy mill, and the owner of that location was actually previously held a kennel license and had been cited for conditions that were similar at this last raid that they had. So I wanted to really lift up our humane law enforcement. You'll hear from Hayden later today from the Brandywine Valley SPCA, and really supporting our humane law enforcement and our law enforcement officers who are out there protecting our pets. This is an example that demonstrates the scope of the puppy mill problem in America today, and specifically in our state. So, background on our state and where we are. So our state each year has several mills that are in the Horrible 100 report. This report is a sampling of not all of the dealers that are producing puppies, but it's a sampling of the ones that we're tracking for the purposes of warning the consumer about the inhumane conditions that exist at these places. And this past year, we had 12 mills on our list. And so this is really precedent for why we are looking to enact Victoria's Law legislation. We know that these dealers are selling to our pet stores, and we know that no responsible breeder is ever selling to a pet store. And so this is one way that we're going to crack down on the retail sales of that pet store puppy line, puppy mill issue. Governor Wolf met with Victoria, and he has been an extremely humane in the passage of Libre's law. He also has made a commitment that he will sign Victoria's law into law, and he called for an end to puppy mills, and he wants to see action taken on this legislation. And I thought this photo just really captures the human-canine bond. And this was at the point that Victoria was no longer able to walk, and he was just, how can we move up in these state rankings to this way? Now our next thing to tackle is puppy mills, and it's great to have support from his level of leadership. The Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, has also implemented a pet scams training program. And the reason he did this, we are one of the top 10 states for the highest consumer protection issues as it relates to pet scams. And then I thought, what is a pet scam? What does this mean? Does everyone know what this is? And so we actually are launching an education campaign, because pet scams are when someone's duped into purchasing a puppy mill pet. So the pet might be misrepresented. So those 55 dogs that were rescued from the Pennsylvania Spca, on the internet, it was shown as beautiful facilities, and these dogs are being raised in the best care. But that was not the case at all. They were in inhumane conditions. They were not being treated with vet care. They were in filthy conditions. And that was the same when Attorney General Josh Shapiro found that out. He implemented a pet scams training program across the state, and also created an email complaint line. So if you or someone you know has experienced a sick or misrepresented pet, it is really important that we get that information reported to this email address. And that's because data-driven decisions are important. So that really creates the case statement for why we need legislation like Victoria's law. And finally, for this really is the statewide legislation. We have this ordinance in both Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, I'm very proud to say that was a unanimous vote. They passed that 17-0 to ban the sale of puppy mill dogs in the city of Philadelphia. Pittsburgh's includes cats and rabbits, and this is just our bill, but now on a state level. So this is the same legislation on a local level that we're trying to enact on a state level. And then as far as the legislative efforts in Pennsylvania, I just thought, don't you love this photo? I love it. Had to include the kitties in there. So this is Senator Killian when he announced Victoria's law for the first time at the state capitol. And you can see bipartisan support from senators, and the state house also has a companion bill. But this is just so well supported. We have 31 co-sponsors out of 50 senators. So we actually have the votes to pass this bill. So now is the time to call your state senator and ask them to encourage the Senate Judiciary Committee bring this bill up for a vote. So that's one call to action. If there's anything you take from today's presentation from me, call your state senator, call your state legislators. They do listen. They want to hear from you, your constituents. And so I just am really reinforcing the importance of using your voice in this capacity. So the bill will do three things. First, it will move the pet market towards more humane sources like shelters, rescues, and responsible breeders. This is a pet store in Senator Killian's district that, in choosing to forego in selling animals, they hold monthly adoption events at their pet store, and that's how they're promoting the work of shelters and rescues in their community. The second thing it will do is stop the sale of puppy mill dogs, cats, and rabbits in pet stores. This is critical, and Senator Killian is going to talk about this as well, but Pennsylvanians, only 2% of pet sales across our country in our pet stores come from pet sales. So this really shows that the pet market is moving towards more humane sources. And the final thing that this is going to do is protect consumers from being duped into supporting puppy mills. This is Metropolitan Vet Center, the vets who treated Victoria. They are also speaking in support in our campaign video that these are the issues that they see with puppy mill dogs coming into their to their vet center. And then finally, this was huge. This happened this week. Victoria's Law was featured in Pennsylvania's Legislative Services Reporter. This goes out to all legislators, all staffers at the Capitol, anyone who works within the Capitol building. And this was one of the #1 bills that are recommended to have a vote this fall. So now we just have to keep our public voices in support of that. And there's one other bill I wanted to mention that I think you'll be hearing about that's going to be really important to our work. It's called the Animal Cooperation Act. And what this legislation will do is give concurrent jurisdiction to the Office of the Attorney General to prosecute animal cruelty cases across our state. Now, what's really important about this is if a district attorney is requesting support in that capacity, this could be really helpful in certain areas of our state where there are more misdemeanor and felony convictions. So the caseload alone is really challenging. So this would be an additional support to give the tools to local municipalities for animal cruelty cases. So just one to keep an eye out for. And then the other thing, dog wardens in our state. This is huge because we know that our dog wardens are inspecting our kennels, and they're also investigating and inspecting and finding kennels that are illegally operating. This bill, the Senate bill, will help give an increase in our dog law funds so that dog wardens can continue doing the enforcement needed to crack down on puppy mills in our state. So, in closing, what we can do to take action. Hayden, I've said this like 5 times now, right? Call your state legislators and ask them to support Victoria's Law. Second thing, always adopt. We have beautiful pups from the Brandywine Valley SPCA, and they are the cutest things ever, so hopefully we can get those 2 adopted today. And report pet scams to the email address here. And upcoming events you might be interested in Lancaster is September 22nd. There's a Puppy Mill Awareness Day. It's really fun, so if you just want to come out and meet a bunch of really great puppy mill survivors, join us for that. And also October 22nd, there's a rally for Victoria's Law that we're going to hold at the Capitol to really try to get this bill through the Senate this fall so that we can work it through the House the following year. Oh, and that's Heather Mitz. Does everyone know this? Soccer player, U.S. soccer player. So she is a huge spokesperson for Victoria's Law. I'm a huge soccer fan, in case you can't tell. So she is going to be at the rally at the Capitol and calling for passage of this legislation. So we're really great to have her support. Now, who's ready to take action? I just thought that was a cute photo, too. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions now or later, but thank you so much for choosing to make a difference in the lives of animals each and every day. Yeah, I can do that if you. Just to close, we're going to show a video that of the 55 dogs, because I think this really demonstrates the seriousness of this issue in our state.
We're learning more about 55 dogs removed from a property in Lancaster County. Vets are working overtime to nurse them back to health.
The SPCA says the owner duped online buyers, misrepresenting the deplorable conditions where the dogs have been living. Priscilla Ligori spoke with the investigators.
The PSPCA says the dogs were being marketed online in beautiful conditions for them to be found at a filthy, unlivable property.
This rescue really demonstrates the scope of the puppy mill issue in Pennsylvania.
Law enforcement found 55 dogs in a Lancaster County home. Multiple were stuffed in the same crates with feces seeping out. The owner, who had been cited before for poor conditions, used to have a kennel license but gave it up.
Clearly a situation where the individual knew what the laws were, what the expectations were.
Now the dogs are being nursed back to health in Philadelphia. One has severe pneumonia and several are on IV fluids. Charges are pending as the animals get evaluated. Investigators say the owner was tricking online buyers about the dog's living conditions.
Had a website up that was purporting to have just these amazing high quality care for his dog.
The SPCA and Humane Society agree it isn't safe to buy pets online because you don't know enough about where they come from, and it continues the cycle of abuse.
Never purchasing a pet on the internet as well. Pet stores and internet, they can purchase pets from places like this. There is nothing preventing them.
There's currently a bipartisan pet resales bill that would target puppy mills. It's stuck in committee.
We are urging advocates to contact their state legislator and ask them to urge the Senate leadership, Senate Judiciary leadership, to bring this bill up for a fair vote.
All of the puppies are being quarantined for at least 2 weeks as they recover. In Lancaster County, Priscilla Ligori, ABC 27 News.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you.
And now, of course, I would like to, we have the lucky opportunity that we've just heard multiple times, and we certainly would like to hear a bunch more, to contact your local legislators. And we are blessed here in Delaware County to have Senator Tom Killian, who is one of the sponsors of this particular legislation, here to not just talk to us about it, but to advocate throughout the Commonwealth. So if you could please join me in introducing Senator Tom Killian.
Kristen, great job. We left out one celebrity that is supporting legal reform. We got that Victoria's Law. Any Downton Abbey fans out there? She came to Harrisburg. We had a press conference at a meeting on Victoria's Law, and Leslie Nick, who plays the character, I forget her character's name, but she's in the kitchen. She runs the kitchen. She's a huge supporter. Actually, I just got a text from her about a week and a half ago asking me how Victoria's Law is doing. But you've already heard about why we need to do this. You know, Pennsylvania's come a long way from 36 to 10. My goal is to get us to 1. I was proud to support League Race Law, which was spearheaded, championed by a great state senator, Richard Allard. Rich has decided to retire as no longer a state senator. I think once he got that across the finish line, he felt like he did what he really wanted to do. But that bill, very similar. That poor, you had a picture of that. But seriously, I have seen pictures before. That poor dog, now suffering when it was rescued and brought back to health. And you know, the legislative process is very difficult. You have, as you heard, the bill goes to be introduced, it has to go to committee, and it has to go to the appropriations committee, then the floor upon vote, then it's going to the House. I've learned the easiest way to pass legislation in Pennsylvania is bring it home. Lieber spent a lot of time in the Capitol with Kristen, met all of us, and we got that bill across the finish line. Now we're hoping to do the same with Victoria's Law. You saw the pictures. She was a beautiful German Shepherd. She, too, spent a lot of time in the state capitol. She had her own little wagon. As you mentioned, she had a degenerative disease that prevented her from walking. And she suffered greatly. She was in a puppy mill, forced to raise 150 to 200 puppies, without even sure how many, until she was finally rescued by a loving family and had 1 year of great life before she finally passed. But we have to get this bill across the finish line, and we're working on it now. You heard the number of co-sponsors, and it's currently in Lisa Baker's committee, the Judiciary Committee. Lisa and I are very good friends. We were talking about this bill. But that's a very busy meeting. I have another bill in our committee dealing with gun violence, red flag bill. And I'm also trying to move forward my legislation. So we're asking you to reach out to Lisa and others, reach out to Lisa's committee. If you know any of the members on the Judicial Committee, if you look on the website, vote for you know folks within your districts, please have them call because of the committee members put pressure. And I really believe Lisa will move the bill, but as Kristen said, we have a 2-year legislative cycle, and then it ends, and we start over from scratch. We're going back the 23rd of September. We only have 15 legislative days. And I heard we may cancel 3 in the Senate, taking us down to 12. And if we don't get it done in the fall, we have to come back and start in January. It's still in the Senate. I would much prefer to have the bill out of the Senate, in the House, so that we have a full year in the House to complete the bill. Again, as you heard, the governor will sign it. You heard about Meagher's law, and this is what moved us from 36 to 10. To strengthen our animal cruelty laws, by increasing penalties for animal provides for dogs keeps dogs from being tethered for no longer than 30 minutes in temperatures above 90 degrees or below 32 degrees. Animals must be provided sanitary shelter that allows the animal to maintain normal body temperature and keeps the animal dry all year. If found guilty, dog owners now face felony charges, fines up to $15,000, and could spend up to 7 years in prison. I was very pleased to help Rich get this bill across the finish line. As I said, we need to do the same with the puppy mill bill, Victoria's law. It's very simple. Over the last several decades, really, we've passed laws to try to regulate puppy mills, to try to make them more humane. It just doesn't happen. You saw the examples of how these individuals treat the animals. They think they're just livestock. They treat them no different than you would treat a cow or a pig that you're raising, that they don't understand that these animals are very special. So the only way to stop it is to cut off the source. If they don't have any place to sell their puppies, then they can they'll have to go out of business. That's our goal here. This bill will require that the pet stores sell puppies that are sourced from licensed breeders, that they identify where they came from, and at the end we know that the puppies that are being purchased in Pennsylvania are puppies that have been breeded correctly, that aren't carrying diseases forward, and makes for a much better life. I have fortunate to have numerous dogs. We now have a black lab that I don't need an alarm clock. 5:30 every morning, Ivy comes in and wakes me up. And as Kat said, there's so much a part of our life. This bill, and it doesn't just deal with puppies, it also deals with cats and rabbits. They too are held in horrific conditions. So I would ask you to please reach out to anybody you know in the State Senate or the State House to help us move this forward. As was mentioned, we have a significant number of co-sponsors. We will get it across the finish line. And in closing, I want to thank Neumann University. Very proud to have this great institution in my Senate district. I want to thank our District Attorney, Kat Copeland, and Kristen. I think Kristen spends more time in the Capitol than I do, and she's much more popular because she often has a dog with her, or a cat, or some other animal. So I want to thank Neumann for having us today. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If we could do another quick round of applause for our panel, and we'll be taking a break then, right after this. Okay, on to our second part of our program. Again, as I mentioned to everyone, if you have any questions throughout, just let me know. I'm happy to give you a card. We're happy to answer questions. The plan will be that we're going to continue with the presentation now, and we'll be wrapping up a few minutes early in case anyone has any questions. I do have a few, and we will be presenting or asking those questions to our esteemed panel. So at this time, I am pleased to introduce Sarah Speed. Okay, so I'm sorry. So before we get started with Sarah, we would like to have a brief discussion. Pat Spitzwanger would like to discuss some puppy mill information with you.
I'm sorry, yes, Dan. My name is Pat Biswanger, and I wear two hats here because I'm general counsel to the Brandywine Valley SPCA, and I'm also assistant solicitor to the Delaware County. So I kind of work both capacities, and both of those things obviously touch on animal rights. Maybe not so obviously with Delaware County, but it does. But I was listening to the very good presentations on puppy mills and what the state is trying to do about them. And there was one thing that occurred to me that I wanted to mention, so I just asked if I could have a couple of minutes to do that. And that is the sheer insidiousness of this internet puppy sales. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, or if you've ever just, go home at night, even tonight, and do a Google search, okay? And if you just type in the word puppies, okay, they know how to do their SEO, search engine optimization. And you will find plenty of websites, but this one in particular, Greenfield Puppies. Now, I've never done business with them, obviously. I'd rather be shot. But you can, but if you really drill down to this site, you'll see that all they are is they're kind of a broker, They will find you a puppy, but it's going to be from a puppy mill, okay? So if you go here, like Puppy Mill, okay? Or Puppy Finder, excuse me. that was a slip. Yeah, and you're looking, let's say Puppy Basics, or choose breed, okay? And I'm probably going to drive everyone nuts because I'm just so slow. But yeah, I'm too slow for this. So I'll drive everyone crazy. But I did it earlier, and I searched for a Shetland Sheepdog, which happens to be one of my favorites. And I looked for a Shetland Sheepdog in Pennsylvania between $500 and $800. And it came up with a whole bunch of beautiful puppies against a background of luscious green grass, beautiful azaleas, pink azaleas, and these absolutely gorgeous, exquisite little puppies, And so, and then it said, like order me or, find me or whatever. And they'll direct you to a location generally in Lancaster, okay? And so all they're doing is, directing you to a puppy mill, okay? And then, and I have done more research on this site, drilled down deeper and all, and I believe what they do is they collect a commission from the puppy mill. They get you to go to them, they get a commission. My point is not to demonize this particular website, although I'm happy to do that, but my point is that you need to be aware of just how insidious these internet sellers of puppies are. Okay, they go to great lengths to disguise exactly who they are, okay, to make themselves look like legitimate breeders, and you can't take that for granted. And I wanted to bring this to your attention today because besides you were charged with a duty earlier today, which is to call your legislator and ask them to get that bill moving, okay, so that the legislature can do something about these puppy mills, which are truly horrendous, and I could tell you stories that would make your hair stand on end. But also, you need to spread the word to your friends and your family, even your family, but even your friends. So, I had a friend who got a new puppy, and I just said to one of my best friends, and I said, "Oh, where did you get him?" Because it was kind of a unique breed. And he said, "Oh, I got him online. He came from Missouri." And I just like, oh God, I was ready to throw up. And and I looked, and it came from a puppy mill in Missouri. And this is like one of my best friends who's listened to me carry on about puppy mills for years. And it just didn't occur to him that this online seller was a puppy mill. He said, "Oh no, they showed us pictures. He's frolicking in the grass with his brothers and sisters, and it looked great." Well, it's not great, okay? So you need to, spread the word because people will listen to you. They'll listen to you more than they'll listen to almost anybody besides like Sarah McLachlan. So you need to really get out there and spread the word. So that's what I'm asking you today. Your homework, go on Google, just Google puppies or puppies for sale. Look at some of these websites and see how clever they are at disguising who they are. And then spread the word, in your family and your community. Okay, so let's try to undermine these guys a little bit. Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to introduce Sarah Speed. Sarah began her career in animal protection in law school as president of the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund. And while in law school, she drafted legislation, built a coalition of supporters, including domestic violence shelters, testified on behalf of the legislation, and saw it signed by Governor Schwarzenegger shortly after graduation. I won't make any comments on it. I could do some funny, never mind, we'll let it go. As Pennsylvania State Director, Sarah was responsible for shepherding all animal-related legislation, trained hundreds of law enforcement officers, and volunteers in political advocacy and animal cruelty, and created coalitions of animal interests statewide. Sarah was selected after 8 years in those positions as the executive director of the Pennsylvania House Judiciary Committee, and she's recently moved in April of 2019 to fulfill the same role in the Senate. Sarah's also interim, she's got a few jobs she's done, right? Meaning that she currently still wears all of these hats as well, and is passionate about this. She is also the interim executive director of the Pennsylvania State Animal Response Team, which is a national leader in emergency response for animals integrated within the State Emergency Management Agency. Is it PA SART? Does that work? Okay. Provides equipment and trained volunteers to respond to animal-related emergencies ranging from highway accidents and agricultural emergencies to large-scale hoarding cases and animal fighting. We're very pleased to have you here, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, since I missed the first half, I didn't know if people were coming up here or staying down there, or if there was a... Do whatever we want. All right. I've been sitting all day because I came from York, and it's a really long drive, so I'm much happier standing. I also did not bring a PowerPoint because I didn't want to. So, people ask me all the time, how on earth do you work in legislation? Because it's frustrating, it's slow, the building is filled with mean people. You know, you never get anything done, but occasionally you do something and you wake up the next morning and realize you've changed the lives of thousands of animals all across the Commonwealth, and that makes it worth it. And that's what we did in Act 10. When I got hired with the Humane Society of the United States back in 2007, I had 4 bills in my portfolio. And I don't remember how many there are so far this year, but when I handed the reins over to Kristen Tulo here, I think our portfolio was about 25 bills relating to animals, and only a handful of those were negative pieces of legislation. By and large, they were all things that benefited animals. So this issue has really taken off, thanks entirely to the grassroots support and people like you who reach out, who go make those phone calls, who schedule in-person meetings, who go to Humane Lobby Day, and who are making sure that their legislators are being asked about animal protection issues on the campaign trail, in their town halls. When they have votes come put up, you know, if a negative vote gets put up, there's people calling them and asking them why they chose to do that. So we really changed the face of animal protection in Pennsylvania over the last 10 years. And when we did the dog law overhaul in 2008, at that point, it was a 6-month-long campaign where we completely rewrote Pennsylvania's dog law, went from having one of the weakest puppy mill laws in the country to having one of the strongest. And legislators at that time turned that the most effective public advocacy campaign that the Capitol had ever seen. And then into, 2017? Yeah, 2017, we did it all over again. No other nonprofit organization or nonprofit interest has had the impact or the success that the animal movement has had in Pennsylvania. It's unbelievable. So now we have other agencies and coalitions that are modeling what the animal welfare movement has done, and nowhere is that more apparent than in Libre's law. So prior to the passage of Libre's law, for those of you who are familiar with the Animal Cruelty Code, there were 0 felony-level penalties for animal cruelty in Pennsylvania unless you engaged in animal fighting, killed a zoo animal, or poisoned one. That was it. So you could hoard 450 cats, you could strangle a dog with your bare hands. It didn't matter. By and large, it was going to be a summary offense. So these were not penalties that anyone took seriously, and penalties that very rarely made it to the attention of the district attorneys, which is why we had the Humane Society police officers, because back when that law was passed, it was really difficult to get traditional law enforcement to pay attention. But in this incredible swing of interest from the public in animal cruelty issues, now district attorneys are getting trained. They're offering training to their investigators, to their officers. They're reaching out to organizations like the ASPCA and the Humane Society of the United States to ask them how to do it. And of course, we have this lovely, brand new, comprehensive, actually coherent piece of law. So one of the things that drove me nuts about the old Animal Cruelty Code was that it was speciesist. So there were tougher penalties for abusing a dog or cat than there were for abusing any other animals. Nowhere else in the Cruelty Code, with the exception of enhanced penalties for harming a child under the age of 13 or something like that, is there a difference in what the penalty is based on the victim. I don't care if you blow up a turtle or if you blow up a kitten, the penalty should be the same because you blew up another living creature. So that was the big impetus for this legislation. It evolved out of a number of conversations, and Representative Todd Stevens was interested in taking it on. And I believe the conversation I had with him back then was, oh, we need to stop like tinkering with the edges of the animal cruelty code. The whole damn thing just needs to be rewritten. And he said, okay, get me a draft. 10 years ago, nobody would have signed on for such a deranged assignment. The most fun part about this was that it was the easiest thing to do would be to just gut and replace the old law with the new one. So that's, if you're used to legislative drafting, you can either have like this really untidy, disgraceful piece of legislation that has all these insertions and deletions and is really difficult to read, or you just knock out the whole old thing and you write the new one. Well, when we did that, it looked like all the language was new. So interesting things about the old law that nobody ever noticed, like assault on honeybees. Did you note that's a crime? It exists. It's here. Yeah, you're not allowed to mess with honeybees. You also can't mess with a homing pigeon. If you derail a homing pigeon in pursuit of its duties, it's a crime in the state of Pennsylvania. So one of the biggest issues that we had in working on redoing this legislation was just getting everyone acquainted with this really funky law and everything that was already on the books. But primarily what we wanted to do was create classifications of penalty and allow for punishment that actually fit the egregiousness of that offense. So the old cruelty code said it was, summary offense to cruelly ill-treat, beat, overload, or otherwise harm an animal, something along those lines, summary offense, and then additional carve-outs for different types of behavior, including that poisoning or torturing language. So what we did was we classed out those offenses into actual different sections. So we created neglect of an animal with a relatively low penalty unless neglect of that animal results in serious bodily injury or death. Again, mirroring the crimes code, making it easier for law enforcement to understand because it's the kind of language they've already been dealing in. I don't know too many officers that understand what cruelly ill-treat or overload means because it was very clearly written to deal with horses and not cats. Then we created the offense of animal cruelty, which we left the language very similar to what it was to try and make sure that we maintained all the case law that had developed over the years around that particular language. So that was intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly ill-treating, overload, beat, or abandon, or abuse an animal. And then we created the offense of aggravated cruelty to an animal, which created felony-level penalties for egregious conduct that results in serious bodily injury or death. This was the easy part. The less easy part was including legislation or including language around tethering of dogs. This is legislation that has been around my entire career. It started way back when. I think we just had a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. ban was the language that was introduced, and that language just could not get traction no matter what we did. It was a matter of policy for people like me who work in the legislature itself. Our job is to make sure that the laws that we pass make sense, are legally sound and generally constitutional. I'm not saying we adhere to that all the time, but that's kind of the general principle that we're going for. And there was concern within the legislature that you can't take conduct that's not a crime at 9:55 p.m. and make it a crime at 10:01 p.m. That's odd. So we have things like regulations where you can't sell alcohol after 3 a.m. or something like that. But that's a far cry from making it a crime to do something at a particular time of day. So that was kind of the insurmountable roadblock that we came up with in tethering. But because the supporters of this legislation were so adamant and passionate and had worked so hard on these issues and really wanted there to be something for problematic tethering, there were a lot of examples on both sides of tethering that was egregious and cruel, and a lot of examples of tethering that just isn't. There's nothing cruel about putting a dog on a lead that is in a well-fitted collar and leaving it outside for 15 minutes to go to the bathroom because the dog jumps fences really easily and it's not safe to, leave them out unless they're leashed or tied. So crafting that legislation, that language became very difficult, and where the negotiations landed was creating a rebuttable presumption. Not something that really exists in the crimes code, and a lot of what my job is making up language that has never been done before and then trying really hard to see if it works. This language was not mine. I hate it. But It's the language that came up as the result of those compromises, and it was something, and it's been the bane of our existence ever since. So it is a rebuttable presumption that the animal is not neglected if it is tethered appropriately, so not for too long, not with inappropriate collars, and then it creates a rebuttable presumption that the dog is neglected if it has excessive waste in its area or has open sores or any other violation of the Cruelty Code is also present alongside that tethering. This means that a lot of us have to do a heck of a lot more legwork in trying to prove that these cases constitute neglect, which I know has caused no end of struggle and strife within the law enforcement community. And I hope one day that we have sufficient body of research to show what problematic tethering is, that we can tighten up that language and make that better and more understandable for everyone to deal with. I think covers everything. Oh, then the other one. So I thought that the tethering language was going to be the big sticking point of the legislation. Like, I thought that was where everything was going to hit, because it had been so contentious in 10 years we've been working on this. We never even had a hearing on the issue. No, it was the inclusion of one little thing that was my personal pet thing to include, which was civil immunity for Humane Society police officers. Volunteer firefighters, high school football coaches, all law enforcement, all enjoy civil immunity. Yet just about every Humane Society or shelter in the Commonwealth that employs a Humane Society police officer, and let's remember that's the only way you can be a Humane Society police officer, is to affiliate with a 501c3 nonprofit. All of them have been sued based on the conduct of their officers. And I personally have gone in and testified on behalf of shelters in these seizure cases. I have testified on behalf, as a character witness, on behalf of humane police officers when defendants have tried to have their credentialing revoked. I've seen the insurance policies that the shelters have to maintain in order to have the privilege of spending their donors' money in order to prosecute violations of Pennsylvania's animal cruelty law. Let's also remember that none of the fines, fees, or costs that are collected by the courts for any of these cases go back to the shelters. Only restitution might go back to them if it's actually collected. Everything else goes to the Judicial Computer Fund. So I felt like the least we could do for our animal shelters would be to offer qualified civil immunity that obviously doesn't cover any violation of law or violation of anyone's civil rights or really curtail anybody's ability to sue unless that suit is frivolous. That was the big blow up on the floor of the House of Representatives in dealing with this law, that there was all of a sudden a fear that having a very qualified level of civil immunity meant that humane police officers were going to go rogue and be shutting down farms all across the Commonwealth. Like, clearly, I personally, as a vegetarian, obviously that was my motivation, and I really wanted to make sure that we halted all animal agriculture in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania by trying to save our animal shelters money. It was a very interesting struggle. However, our sponsors, our supporters, Representative Stevens, Representative Bizzarro, Representative Petrarca, did an incredible job of illustrating the stupidity of that particular argument, highlighting that, in fact, Humane Society police officers are trained on agricultural security. They are trained in animal handling. They understand all of the nuances, the dangers, and what is and is not normal agricultural practices far more than any other type of law enforcement officer. And as a result, Libre's law passed the House with negative, I think 4 people voted against it, sum total. And otherwise it passed after an almost a day-long negotiation on this law. So that was the other big thing that was accomplished in Libre's law, and I believe I saw one shelter who had $1 million insurance policy, and I think the premium on that dropped 80% after passage of this law. So it's the least we can do to say thanks to all of the officers who do all this incredible work. So that's pretty much the overview of not just the law and what it does, but also the tribulations of getting there. So I think I'm on the early train too. All right, cool.
Sarah, thank you so very much for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. It's great to see folks like you and Kristen working so hard for us, so I appreciate that very much. Now, I'm just going to reintroduce to you guys the person that you had the opportunity to hear speak a few minutes ago about some websites. Patricia Biswanger, Brandywine Valley SPCA's General Counsel. and also a assistant solicitor for Delaware County. Pat, as you can see, is quite passionate about this, but she's also active in the community, serving on the board of the ARC of Chester County, providing services to children with autism and other developmental delays, as well as having an extensive background in animal rescue. Have worked for many years in animal rescues herself. Pat?
Okay. Yeah, again, my name is Pat Biswanger, and if anybody here is from the area around Media, Springfield, Nether Providence, and you remember people standing at the corner of Baltimore Pike and Providence Road on Saturday mornings protesting a store there called We Love Pets. Anybody remember that? That was me. And that is actually not quite my start in animal welfare, but it was kind of my start. Because up until that time, it didn't register with me that people were actually selling puppy mill puppies in pet stores. And when I found that out, I was like, well, this can't go on. So I organized that demonstration and went on for 2.5 years. So anyway, but now I'm going to talk about something completely different, okay? And that is, bear with me here. Which one do I click on? From the beginning? Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay. Service dogs, therapy dogs, and emotional support dogs. It's a topic that's become pretty, it can be contentious, a little more popular, or a little more, out in the news these days, because, people are bringing their dogs more into public, and it's something that we all, are dealing with more, and maybe even in law enforcement, you're seeing more issues arising around that. So what I'm going to do is define what each of them are, and we'll talk about how to recognize the difference between them. The first category, and I have the picture here, the first one, service dogs. And that is the one that we're probably all most familiar with, because we all, grew up with the idea of seeing eye dogs. And those are recognized under federal law, under Title II of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. State and local government are required to recognize the category of service dogs. And Title III, which is public accommodations, are required to recognize service dogs. Public accommodations including things like hotels and movie theaters and shopping centers, malls, stores, whatever. These kind of dogs, and I see we have one with us today, a very well-behaved service dog, right? And they're required to undergo a very rigorous course of instruction so that they can assist a certain individual with certain specific tasks. It's not like, you don't get this dog off the shelf, okay? This dog is trained to help somebody with either seeing eyes for the blind, hearing and alerts for the deaf. And they've also become, I would say in the past 20 years, much more sophisticated, like the seizure response dogs. Dogs that know what to do if their owner has a seizure, or some dogs can even detect when the owner's about to have a seizure, which is really remarkable. The owner, him or herself, may not even know that a seizure is coming, but the dog might. The dogs can be, they can know how to remind their owner that it's time to take a medication. And then they have the dogs that are called the SIG dogs, where they're, social signal dogs or social signal dogs, trained to assist a person with autism. Now, I have a friend who has a son, teenager, who's pretty far along the spectrum with autism, and he is getting a dog trained for him. And this is, like I said, a very rigorous process. The dog is in North Carolina. It's taking somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 years to train this dog from puppyhood to be trained exactly for, this young man, so that this dog will be able to accompany him, so that he can avoid the things that trigger him, so that he can be comfortable in public spaces, and so that he can, avoid things that, frighten him, get on his nerves and all. And so it's very personalized, individualized training for this young man with autism. So it's gotten to be very sophisticated, and it is very individualized training. Dogs, they can also open doors, open refrigerators, they can carry items, they can pull wheelchairs, you know, whatever they're trained to do, whatever's appropriate for the dog and for the owner. So that's a service dog. Now, I think that I have here, I show a picture of a person in a wheelchair, and she's got herself a miniature horse. Now, some of that was shown recently on the media, like the Today Show and, you know, what's that one on Channel 6, something, Good Morning America, you know, they were showing that. And you know how these shows are, they like to make a big deal like, miniature horse on an airplane? That's crazy talk, you know? Well, it's actually not that crazy, it's kind of reasonable, because miniature horses, my cousin raises miniature horses out in Jennersville. They're not that big, you know, there's the size of maybe like a mastiff, you know, like a big dog. And the advantage to a miniature horse is that they're as smart as a dog, but they last a lot longer. You know, a miniature horse can be in service for like 25 to 28 years, whereas a dog will be in service for usually like 6 to 8 years, especially a larger breed. So a miniature horse can really be the answer for a lot of people. And so I think we're going to be seeing more of them, you know? And of course, everybody's question is, well, what about if it decides to poop somewhere? Well, they can be trained just like dogs, you know, they can be diapered, you know, things like that. And so, and I said they're very intelligent, so they can be trained just like the dogs can. They are recognized now under the ADA as being eligible as service animals, just like dogs are, okay? As long as they have undergone the same kind of training and as long as they're certified, okay? And like I said, like I said, they have to be recognized, certified, and all that. So, but I think we're going to be seeing more and more of them. And there was a picture going around, like on Facebook, of these people who were sitting on an airplane and they had a dog, or excuse me, a miniature horse right at their knees. And they looked profoundly uncomfortable because this was, you know, a miniature horse, but about the same level of discomfort as if they'd had a mastiff at their knees, you know? So, but I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. Okay. The thing to remember is the handler or the owner is responsible for the care and supervision of his service animal. If you're in a public space, the building owner, the shopping center owner, the movie theater owner, they are not responsible to take care of that animal. They're not responsible for, you know, picking up poop or anything like that. If for some reason the dog, unlike this dog here, is perfectly well behaved, but if for some reason the dog does start barking or jumping up at people or something like that, then the manager of the property can insist that the dog be removed from the premises. Okay? They're not allowed to create a distraction or a problem. But, you know, if they're well behaved and all, then they're allowed to be, you know, on any kind of premises, with pretty much without restriction. But they can be denied access if they're misbehaving. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, the only can exclude them if their behavior presents a threat. If they're growling, you know, and scaring customers. I mean, I don't think that happens very often with a service animal, but you know, but if the owner doesn't really have good control over the animal, well, that could be a problem. So then, you know, then they could be excluded from the premises. The owner has to have direct control over the dog at all times, usually with a tether, some kind of a harness or a leash. Occasionally, they can control it with voice commands, but usually it's a tether or a harness. But if a person doesn't have use of his or her own arms, it might be necessary to resort to voice commands. Again, it's a personalized, individualized, you know, decision and the training that accompanies that decision. Okay. Obviously, the animal must be housebroken, okay? And the ADA doesn't require, as I mentioned, that the owner of the facility, the movie theater, whatever, doesn't have to take care of the animal in any way. It's strictly on the owner of the animal. Animal has to be vaccinated in accordance with state and local laws. Every once in a while you hear a story about somebody who, like an anti-vaxxer, you know, who doesn't believe in vaccinating their children, and they've come to that same conclusion with their dog, you know, every once in a while. Well, that's not going to work, okay, with a service dog. They have to have the appropriate vaccinations. And the miniature horse, you know, they can, like especially airlines, they can assess the animal's, you know, weight and size and everything if they're going to say if it's going to work or not. Like, you know, a miniature horse like on Spirit Airlines might not work, because human beings barely work on Spirit Airlines, so might not happen. Okay. Now, the next category, okay, would be therapy animals. And I'll tell you my experience with therapy animals just to illustrate the point. A few years ago, long story, I had a spinal cord stroke, and I was a quadriplegic for a few days, and then I was recovering from that, and I had to go into Bryn Mawr rehab. And I was, you know, recovering from that, and I still have some residual effects, but anyway, I was in there, and they, in the gym, and they said, oh, you know, tomorrow's the day we bring in the therapy dogs. And I was like, therapy dogs, you know, what, that's for kids, you know. My dog's at home, I miss my dog, but I don't need some therapy dog, you know, and I scoffed at the whole thing. Well, I had been in there like a week, and I was looking at being there a month. So they brought in this German Shepherd the next day, and I just burst into tears. I got all over this dog, you know, and I was just hugging it, and I just could not get enough of this dog, and I didn't want to let anybody else get near it. It was like, this is my dog. I just love that dog. And after that, they brought in the dog several days a week, and I just couldn't get enough of it, and it just made me feel so much better. And, you know, it made the whole experience of being in rehab for a month, you know, and, you know, working at a gym and working my way through paralysis and everything that goes with that, just so much more bearable, you know, just spending time, mostly with this German Shepherd, but there was also a couple other dogs that came in. And so I can tell you from firsthand experience that therapy dogs are absolutely wonderful. But therapy dog, it doesn't have to be a dog though. It can be any animal, okay, that is trained to provide affection and comfort to people who are in facilities like Bryn Mawr Rehab. But schools, hospices, disaster areas, hospitals, nursing homes, whatever, they do have to be trained. You know, like I used to bring my dog over to Dunwoody to see my cousin who was like 80. And my dog's a Doberman mix, and she's usually very quiet, and then one day she saw this nurse's aide and decided she didn't like her, and she just looked at her and like snapped at this poor woman. And well, that was the last visit she ever made to Dunwoody. And so, you know, it wasn't her scene. So they do have to be trained so that you know that it's an appropriate dog. These therapy dogs, they also bring them in to listen to children who are practicing their reading. Okay, they go visit seniors, they said like Dunwoody. They go visit patients in hospitals. And they generally, like I said, they have to be trained just to make sure it's an appropriate animal, and they're certified by somebody who is in a position to certify them. It's not just somebody like me who says, yeah, that's a good dog, you can send them in there. It has to be somebody who is recognized as having the expertise in that area. Okay, so that they get entry to this facility in connection with a specific program. Okay, and yeah, and this one I'm showing you like an elderly person here. You'll see there's lots of instances where dogs are brought into hospitals, especially like children's hospitals, and they will hop right up on the bed with the child. And like I said, I can't tell you, if you're facing a lengthy hospital stay, just what it means to you. And I can imagine to a child too, you know, to be able to spend some time cuddling with the dog. And this, like I said, this lady here spending some time with the dog, it really, you know, dogs just make all the difference in the world. And I'm harping on dogs because I'm a dog person, but, you know, other animals provide that same level of comfort. But it has to be an appropriate animal, and they have to be appropriately screened and trained. Now, the area where we can get into a little bit of contentiousness and a little bit of difficulty, and you can also see some fraud, which I'm sure you've heard about on the news, are emotional support animals. Okay? This can be any animal, generally a domesticated animal, but absolutely any animal whatsoever. And I forget, what did I have on the cover page here? I forget which one I put there. A turkey, okay. Yeah, because it literally can be anything. I've seen peacocks and, pigs, skunks, just about anything. People will say, this is my emotional support peacock, okay? Not an animal you would think could reciprocate on any level with you, but people will say it does. It's supposed to be a part of the owner's psychological treatment plan and prescribed by a licensed mental health professional. It can be part of treatment for depression, anxiety, phobias, loneliness. Okay, they're supposed to help a specific person, but they don't go through any specific training or certification. And in fact, okay, if you go online and you look up emotional support animal, one of the first things you're going to see, okay, is companies that will sell you the letter that you need saying that this is your emotional support animal, that they have a doctor who has evaluated your condition. You wrote a letter to this doctor. Maybe you might have even had a phone call, I doubt it, but you wrote him a letter saying, I suffer from anxiety and depression, and I need this alligator to provide me emotional support, okay? And the doctor will write a letter on his letterhead saying, I have evaluated this patient's condition, and I have determined that she needs her alligator to provide emotional support. And then this company here, like the one on the left here, is on, they have their own website and everything. And they'll give you like a vest for your alligator. They'll give you a certificate saying that he is certified as an emotional support animal. They'll give you all these little badges and stickers and stuff like that. And they call it the Ultimate ESA package, and I think it sells for like $299. Yeah, $299. You're paying that doctor, right? Now the one on the right, okay, that is just a little, badge, thing you put on your alligator's, collar, and a couple other little pieces of paper and all. That you get on Etsy, okay? And that, I forget, I think that was like $49. So it depends on what level of duplicity you want to engage in, but you can find these things all over the internet, and obviously, I don't know who's fooling who, but, this is what you can do if you really want to say, this is my emotional support animal, and you don't have your own doctor, to certify that you do indeed need this animal, to be your emotional support animal. Now, the airlines are really cracking down on this stuff because it was starting to get really out of hand, The airlines are the ones who bear the liability. If your emotional support, turkey decides to go after somebody, and chase them down the aisle and bite somebody, the airline's going to bear the responsibility. So they are the ones who are restricting these things, refusing to recognize some of these commercially available certifications, and just saying flat out, no, we're not doing this, okay? Maybe a dog, maybe a cat, maybe a rabbit, but they're going to be in containers. They're going to have to fit under the seat in front of you, just like every other animal. And, but we're not going to play this game anymore, okay, because it just got out of hand. It's like everything else, Somebody gets this idea, other people do it, they play it out too far, and then people say, the airline finally says, enough already, and they crack down, okay? And so that's what's happening now with emotional support animals. So they, it's getting cracked down on, but you might encounter it in your work, especially if you're a law enforcement officer. You might have situations where somebody's insisting that they can take their emotional support animal into a movie theater, or a shopping center or something like that. Well, emotional support animals, okay, are not considered service animals under the ADA. Not at all, okay? They could conceivably receive certain housing rights, okay? Conceivably, okay, but they are not under the ADA. They do not have the legal right to visit public places with their owners, okay? Even if there are pet policies in place, they're not really considered pets, okay? Even though any domestic animal may be considered an ESA, okay, they're not working animals because they don't assist with a physical task. See the difference? You know, like your alligator's not going to go and open the refrigerator, you know, and get your milk out for you. Okay, you can't train him to do that. Okay, he might sit on your lap or sit at your feet or something, but he's not going to assist you with the task. So he's not going to qualify as a service animal under any stretch of the imagination. So all he does is reduce some of your stress, some of your emotional feelings, that kind of thing. So, and that's not going to go anywhere with the ADA. It is possible, like it says here, that it could be legally protected under the Air Carrier Access Act, but that doesn't mean that they are free to just wander up and down the aisle and sit on your lap, okay? They'll have to be in a container and whatever restrictions the airline wants to place on them. So that doesn't, you know, that doesn't give them free reign to do whatever. The airlines can restrict what type of animal, and they can impose other restrictions because, again, they're the ones who bear the liability in the end. Okay. And businesses are not required at all to allow the ESA inside their place. So, and here's just some examples. You know, working dogs are generally welcome anywhere, okay? Pets are not permitted, okay, in most facilities. I mean, sometimes, you know, especially like restaurants that have outdoor seating, you know, you can bring your dog and he sits at your feet, you know, you can sit outside at the table, and that's okay. But, oh, and here's an example of another, you know, the working, or emotional support skunk, and he's got one of those internet vests, okay? And here's a couple more examples of, yeah, we got a pigeon, a pig, a peacock, and then we have an emotional support chicken, which is actually from Popeyes. And Popeyes decided to do this last year, and you will be very proud to know that they only sold their emotional support chicken in one of their outlets, and it was at Philadelphia International Airport. And it was 3 pieces of their fried chicken, not a sandwich, sorry, but 3 pieces of fried chicken sold at their outlet in the Philadelphia International Airport. It was the only place in the whole United States. So that's it. And, oh, except I have a quiz. Okay. Quick quiz, and the answer's right there, so this is not hard. Okay, so everybody should get 100 on this. Okay, true or false? Service, therapy, and emotional support animals all have to be certified. False, right? Service animals are certified, obviously, and therapy animals go through screening, but emotional support animals, it's just the Wild West out there. Okay. True or false? While not typical, miniature horses can be considered service, therapy, and emotional support animals. True. Okay, and we're going to be seeing more and more of them, I think, because the cost of training a dog is astronomical. I haven't heard anything lately, but I think we're looking at like 100,000 or more, you know, to train a dog. And the horse said, well, you know, it can work for 25, 28 years. So, you know, it's a long time. True or false? Therapy animals must be given access to no pet housing under the Fair Housing Act. False, okay? Therapy animals perform their work off-site. Remember, these are the animals that you take to a nursing home, a hospital, something like that. So they are not service animals, okay? So that's the difference there. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Ask now, absolutely.
I just had a question about service animals in like inpatient facilities like hospitals, nursing homes, where perhaps their handler is too ill to take care of them, and there is no family willing, able, or whatever to take care of them. And presumably they are in a facility that is meeting their physical needs, although I know there's some service animals that provide these, you know, like
I haven't encountered that exact situation, though I wouldn't be surprised if I do someday. And did everybody hear the question? The question was what happens if the owner handler of a service animal, I'll say a dog, is admitted to some kind of long-term care, hospital or nursing home. And so they really don't have any need for their service animal anymore because the facility is taking care of the person. And the facility policy doesn't really permit the dog to be there. Well, I would think in that case, if the person is expected to be there long-term, but maybe not forever, probably they could hook up with a rescue or a shelter that would look for a foster program for the animal. The place that trained the animal would probably take it back and foster it for as long as necessary. If it looks like a permanent placement, like this person is expected, frankly, to die, in the nursing home, then if I were involved in that situation, I would contact the agency that trained the dog and say, what do you want us to do? And if the nursing home won't let the dog stay with the person, I would imagine that would be psychologically or emotionally really difficult on the owner to have to say goodbye to her dog, But if that's the way it's going to be, I would ask the training facility, what do you want us to do? So do you want us to find a new home for the dog, or do you want to do that? So, and I don't know, have you ever dealt with that, Hayden? Yeah.
I have in my past life, and we've had owners absolutely demand that the service animal be able to stay by their side. They wanted him to go to the operating room with them, which obviously
Yeah.
shouldn't even say obviously, it wasn't allowed. But the handlers sometimes get very demanding and very threatening to the facility.
Oh.
Just curious from people that have similar experiences from the facility perspective, because they then expect the hospital staff to take the dog out, and it just doesn't make sense. But if they get there, it can be very demanding and very threatening.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I can see where it'd be very threatening to them too, the thought of losing their animal, or if they don't know if they're going to come out of the hospital or where their animal's going to be. I can imagine where that would be terrifying for the person, I don't know, my daughter's a doctor with Mainline Health. I'm going to ask her if she's ever encountered that, because it's a good question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. And as to your point in the recent question, there are a lot of interesting and important issues that are really still pending on a lot of these different matters. And I think as the legislation and also the law changes, hopefully we'll have better guidance on a lot of the different issues. But now switching gears to enforcement, we are pleased to welcome Hayden Carroll with Brandywine Valley SPCA. He's a Humane Society police officer and manager of the Department of Animal Protective Services. Having done this since 2015, he has prosecuted and investigated more than 45 cases of animal cruelty and neglect. Hayden, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, as she stated, I work with Brandywine Valley SPCA as a Humane Society police officer. To make it easy, I'm going to refer to that term as a HSPO from here on out. And just to touch base, and I know Ms. Speed touched on it, but here in the state of Pennsylvania, and it is unique not just to Pennsylvania, but only to a handful of states, that there's legislature giving us full police powers, us as agents of nonprofit agencies, to have these police powers to investigate, obtain search warrants, and arrest individuals for animal cruelty. Now, during this time, I've been there since the transition of Libra's law, and there were hurdles before then, a lot more than there are now. There are still some. And, I've also seen, working with a lot of the men and women of law enforcement throughout Chester and Delaware County, how cooperation is key, not just with law enforcement, but with individuals of the community. So, a good example of what it used to be and what we used to face was, there's a place out in Chester County called Nottingham. It's out western Chester County. It's kind of farm-like. An individual out there had his house go on fire, and an animal, in result, was burned. Pretty bad, about second-degree burns across its body. We got out there approximately 6 days after the incident from a call of the neighbor. Going out looking at this dog, this adult male Rottweiler type, it had a bunch of fresh burns all across its body, which is typically weird for 6 days in after a burn. And we, through the process, found out that 3 times a day he was taking hydrogen peroxide and a rag and scrubbing the dog down. This was, under his mind, what he found out online and not through a vet, because he failed to bring it to vet care. Hydrogen peroxide is fantastic for many things, not for burns, and neither is rubbing. So we did issue a citation for lack of vet care, which at the time was a summary offense. So, either you can basically, it's not the definition of torture, but you can torture an animal or throw a piece of garbage in front of an officer. Either way, you get a summary offense. And it went to court, and he was fined $90. And on top of that, we prosecuted the case. So we became lawyers. It was a fun, shocking reality of what it was like to be a humane officer, and that's the way it was. Now, where we are now is something like that would more than likely be in the misdemeanor to felony range, so we're already seeing the drastic change in representation for the law with our animals, which is fantastic. So that was a big hurdle, was the way the laws were written, the way that they were just kind of all crammed in there, the way that basically anyone outside of the SPCA had a hard time understanding them, and the way that prosecution was really tough because it fell in the lap of nonprofit agents. Now, where we are now, we still bump into some issues. We have growing pains. I think we'll all agree, if we're humane officers or law enforcement officers, that our tethering laws have really helped regulate something that's just been the Wild West of doing things. You can, as Ms. Speed explained, tether an animal out for more than a half an hour in less than 32 degrees. People do it, they used to all the time, they still do, but we can hold them accountable. The difference is you can take a wooden structure, throw some hay in it, stick it in the backyard. It could be negative 20 degrees. The dog doesn't really want to go in there and slowly freezes to death, and we can't say that it didn't have suitable shelter. So, not the nitpick, but it is an experience, and anybody who does animal enforcement will understand that hardship of what we have to do. Also, we are, of the public sector, or private, being in part of an SPCA, so that means we don't have access to what's called JNet. That's what law enforcement uses to check people. We basically have no way to confirm that this guy has active felony warrants for attempted murder while we're knocking on the door with blacked out windows waiting for him to come in about his dog barking in his backyard. We do not have the use of state forensic labs. So when I take things like knives that people use to basically kill their animals, I have no way to test it. We do hit the hurdles, but through cooperation with usually local and state police departments, we do get a lot of help from cooperation in the district attorney's office. We get a lot of help of getting these things tested, getting these things prosecuted, and getting actual charges to stick, have people incarcerated, or if anything, put on a prohibition of ownership, which basically means they can't be in or around animals. The reality is, like all crimes, there is people who constantly break the law. You take an animal from them, you hit them with a fine, you turn around, and they're doing it to another animal. And we're also, with that said, and I believe DA Copeland stated this, that we're now really seeing these links. We see it as humane officers in every house. Those who neglect their animals often neglect their children. Those who abuse their animals usually abuse a spouse, their elderly parent, their children inside the house. If anyone's ever been incorporated with dog fighting, you'll notice that usually they're gang related. There's firearms, there's narcotics. So it's not just always a kook with their cats. It usually is more nefarious and detrimental to the Commonwealth and the neighborhood and the community and the animals themselves. And it's more systemic than just what it seems like on the surface for some. And you know, that cooperation is not just superficial with us in law enforcement, but Lieber's Law is a great example of what that cooperation between us and the state and local government looks like. We as law enforcement are only as effective as the legislature that we're enforcing. If it's not well defined or if it's not defined at all, there's not much that we can do about it. A great example is we now can actually break a window for a dog that's actively dying and not get sued. So about a year ago, and that includes local and state police officers, if we broke a window, we would get sued. And we would basically either have to watch the dog die, which unfortunately I have done, or we would have to go around and ask everybody who owns a blue Ford with a dog that's actually dying. Now, granted, we just don't go bashing windows, but we actually have the flexibility to intervene on certain things because that was not defined. It's not illegal to have a dog in a car. Now it's illegal to have a dog dying in a car because of how it's housed. So we're seeing how that's also becoming more effective, making my life easier and making you individuals sitting in front of me feel a lot better that there's representation for the animals, representation for those who have to wake up every morning and look outside their house and see that animal in the situation that they find themselves in, and actually feel like people are being held accountable for their actions or lack thereof. And you know, there's a big reason to maintain cooperation between us as humane officers and the public. I can count on my hands how many cases started for me just happening to stumble into a situation. It always starts with a complaint. It always starts with a concern. And you're seeing in a larger scale the public demand for definition, for follow through, for the laws. We wouldn't be where we are right now if there wasn't as much backing from the public. We're all here because we're concerned, but just because there's open seats does not mean that there's no one to fill them. Everyone throughout the state is concerned. People voice that concern, and that's why we're here. I mean, your local reps are very important. I know in this field it can kind of sound like a mantra that's repetitive, but I used to feel that way 6-7 years ago, but I will attest, thanks to Kristen, that if you are a squeaky wheel to a degree and you speak to local and state representatives, they actually listen to you. It's pretty amazing. So it's not just a letter that gets a response to it. It does make a change, and the laws are getting more effective. We still have a way to go, but we have gone so far in the last 2 years that basically have been unapproached or just unmoving for such a long time. And especially as humane officers, that the hardest part of my job 2 years ago that feels so much better now is that I actually feel like something's getting done. That I don't have to wait for you to starve your second dog to death to give you a misdemeanor. That I can actually, before you actually start hurting the dog, have a misdemeanor because you're placing it in imminent risk of bodily harm. And you know, really what it comes down together is my job. I love my job. It's a great job. I like working with people. I like working with animals. But it's a cooperative effort. There's no one individual that's more successful than the other in this job. There's no, I did more work or I saw something more terrible than this person or something more great. The reality is I'm only as effective as the people around me and the people in the Commonwealth and people in law enforcement that assist me. And that goes the other way as around. I mean, I'm always readily available to help law enforcement. It's great to see that on the state and local level that there is a stress and emphasis on that training. So there's an understanding on it, but it's a cooperative effort. We shouldn't work in a silo, and not working in a silo got us to where we are now because we are working cooperatively. So I'm a fast talker, so I do apologize. Probably breezed through a half an hour a lot faster than a half an hour is. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Oh, yes? So the good news out of that story was the individual did surrender that dog to our care. So we weren't required to give it back. Oh, you bring up a great point that I overlooked as well. Prohibition of ownership, which is something that was existent there, but really not defined and nobody really knew how to get it certified, a lot of times resulted in giving the animals back. So if you think about the magnitude of if we had to give that dog back to that knucklehead who was doing that. But yes, we got him, we got him rehabilitated. He actually did fantastic and was out up and snuff within a month and adopted. So, that's why I do what I do. So, yes, sir.
The situation that we just discussed with the dog being treated with hydrogen peroxide. I'm getting the feeling that wasn't malicious on the part of the owner. It sounded like the owner was just uninformed.
Yeah, exactly. That is not, as they would say back then, wantingly and cruelly acting like so. What that would fall more under is neglect. If you were to go to a vet, what was that?
Misdemeanor stupidity?
Unfortunately, at that time, a summary stupidity. But yeah, I mean, with animal cruelty, you do have animal abuse. But in this case, you have what's called animal neglect. You're neglecting to go to a vet. I mean, I will be the first one to admit to you, I am not a vet. So I'm not going to talk, think, or act like one. I'm going to seek counsel with one to figure out what's going on. Same with if your kid tripped downstairs and broke its arm, you'd more than likely, hopefully, go to a hospital and talk to a doctor. So, yeah, that would fall under neglect. But now, it would be a serious crime that would get the attention of the state.
And as a follow-up to that, with people in poverty, they have pets. They have a hard time feeding their children, taking their children to the doctors, what have you. Something befalls one of their pets, and it's a choice of, okay, do I buy lunch for my child, or do I take dog, cat, vet? Again, with the best intentions, the animal is not getting treatment perhaps it should get treated. How do you deal with that individual?
So that's a fantastic question, because that is something that and I think that pretty much anybody who works in some capacity of law enforcement bumps into. So here's an example. Out in Coatesville, I got a call from a neighbor about a multitude of cats and dogs inside of a property. The power was shut off, and they feared that these animals weren't being cared for. When I got out there, it was a couple that was living there. The wife was hospitalized due to mental issues, and the husband was working 2 jobs and doing some side work, and they shut the electricity off. So going through the house, he had, to the best of my recollection, maybe 7 cats and 2 dogs. All of them were up to date on rabies vaccination, great health. There was food in the house for the animals, not for him, and the animals were cared for. So what I see there is an owner prioritizing the care of his animals over himself. So what we did, and what we like to do, is we have a program where we provide food. So we hooked him up and set him up with weekly food distributions for both his cats and his dogs. He did surrender 2 of the cats just to narrow the number down a bit, and we actually helped him get with City Hall and apply for a program to help him with his energy. Law enforcement tends to be seen, both in my capacity and just in general, as the people who show up and kick doors and knock heads around. But the reality is, we're sworn to serve the public. I want to promote responsible ownership. So I'm going to work hard at keeping the animals in the homes of people who are responsible, whether or not maybe they don't have the resources or not. And that's what I expect is follow through. If somebody doesn't have money, ask a question. But if you ignore what's blatantly obvious, it makes it a little bit different there. Now, granted, I did have the flexibility of healthy animals. Might be different if I found out that this was 3 months of not seeking care for the animal or something of that. But, I know that I remain very flexible, trying to maintain that and help out where I can. And we have, and many SPCAs have in play ways to provide vet care, sustenance, resources at a low to no cost to maintain this, because the reality is we don't want your animals in our shelter, we want them out, But great question. Yes?
How is it that you differentiate from an enforcement perspective the difference between someone that has a diagnosis perhaps for their animal, doesn't take it to the vet, have it put down, takes it into the backyard, puts a bullet into it as a manner of putting it down? How do you deal with that from a cruelty standpoint? I mean, do you get into the physical nature of the animal itself, and you have to look into all those reasons in order to make a decision regarding cruelty for that?
Yes. So, we're held to the same standard as any law enforcement in which, to have probable cause to believe somebody violated a statute. Now, just stepping back from the dispatching the animal by firearm, Anybody who has a reason to believe that their animal is sick or not sick. Again, it goes back to a veterinarian. Now, anybody who's been to a veterinarian, they cost money, you get a receipt, and they have an account. So my job is, if you go to a vet, I confirm that you do, and if you say you do, I will confirm or figure out that you did not. So if you're making a educated guess about the welfare of your animal and need to make a quick decision that it's actively suffering with the advice of a veterinarian, we'll have that conversation. If you're making an educated guess because you just don't feel like bringing it to a vet, then yes, if I can prove that, that would fall under animal cruelty. So really, it's just, you get used to, I guess, checking the boxes off and what boxes to check while adding in discretion and just situational things, I guess is the best way to put it. Well, I also suffer from the gift of gab. So I work for the Brandywine Valley Spca. A lot of you guys know me, but if not, you can always feel free to reach out to me. As anybody who knows me knows, I never bring business cards, so I apologize. But if you would like to stop me at the end, I have no problem giving you my email. If you ever have questions about animal cruelty related things in either law enforcement or non-matter, I'm always open to discussion and insight. So thank you for your time. Oh.
One more time.
Yeah.
I think that there may be a misunderstanding amongst a lot of people that you guys need to see an actual violation in order to take action. Nowadays, cell phone and video should be your best friends. Have you seen that?
So cell phone and videos are a gift and a curse. I say that in which, on one end, it is a quick way for an individual to document a situation, even as an officer to a degree if they don't subpoena your phone, to grab information on the fly, and people do use it as a complaint. The curse part of it is most of them aren't time-stamped, so I can't prove when they were taken. A lot of people don't like to be associated with it and try to keep it anonymous, which I'm not harping on, but I guess the best way to look at it is it can create a tricky situation in which if somebody takes a picture of a situation, sends it over to me, I need to prove who sent it, when it was taken, where it was taken, and how it was taken. If I cannot prove one of those four, I cannot use that as probable cause to go to a property, nor as supplemental information in a court case. So, as you can see off that, it could be tricky. And then if somebody zooms it in on a computer, you have now altered an image and it gets thrown out. So technology can be your best friend. Technology also can be very painful in a court of law just because it can get too vague. I know that might not be the greatest answer for some, but if you're in law enforcement, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, it can be real tough, but it does help. Social media is one of those where it's great to get information, but we all know that snowballs turn into giant mountains real quick in social media, so it usually creates a headache amidst the situation. So with that said too, just to reiterate what was said in the beginning, if you see something, just say something. So, yes ma'am.
Well, actually, I was just going to ask you that. So the say something part, how are the complaints actually routed to you? Is that generally done through the 911 system, or is there a difference?
We get a bunch, so we dispatch ourselves. We work with local police and state police throughout Delaware and Chester County, so we do get complaints either through their police reports or through their dispatcher. We will get people who call in direct. We have an email service that you can go on our website and file a report. We will get letters mailed to us. Some people even drop in. So really it's about communication. Really what it comes down to is some people want to remain anonymous. I cannot blame them. It's very uncomfortable to have somebody who's beating their animal next door to you find out that you pointed a finger at them. I can't blame them. But there's really it's just letting an officer know, and that goes for any kind of law enforcement, of what is going on and why you're concerned. And then it's our job to see, sometimes the complaint doesn't have enough substance. Most of the time it's more than enough for us to see what is going on and then take it from there. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, again, this is not a knock, but privacy protection goes to the Commonwealth. So we have to dot our I's and cross our T's upon approaching a house to make sure that we are protecting their constitutional rights while also adhering to our policies and procedures. But usually, if there is an issue, there is more than enough through a complainant, possibly their eyewitness testimony, and usually the great thing is dogs are kept outside, so there's some way, typically, to view that outside area to kind of get that information prior to making contact with an individual. Yes, sir.
What is the scope of your jurisdiction? Is it a geographical area that you are?
So for Humane Policing, we are sworn in by the county. So basically, we have 2 petitions in, so anywhere between Chester County and Delaware County, and being county sworn, there are jurisdictional lines in which I'll use, I don't know if you know it, but Sadsbury Township is right on the border. There's also a Sadsbury Township on Lancaster on the other side. In theory, we are limited to, if a guy's on the other side kicking a dog, technically I do not have the jurisdiction to well, I can intervene as a civilian, not as an officer. I cannot prosecute. So there are very hard jurisdictional lines, as opposed to your local and state police do have flexibility outside if they were to, drive around the corner and be in a different jurisdiction. So they are pretty solid lines to that degree, but they're all within the counties you're sworn in. All right. Well, thanks again, guys.
So we're going to wrap this session up with all of the great questions that we just had, and we had a few that were actually brought forward to me as well. If anyone has them, please pass them to the row, and we'd be happy to get them up here as well. But for our panel, anybody can answer the questions. Just turn your mic on, because I don't think everybody's mics are on, and be able to answer these as they come up. So the first is, Delaware County municipalities have nowhere to house stray dogs, pets. Is there funding available to offset costs placed on towns or areas? There's a great starter question for everybody there. Who would like to take that big gorilla first?
Everybody's looking at me.
Yeah.
Right. And in a word, no. But this has been a question that's been plaguing everybody in the county since the Delaware County SPCA, now known as the Providence Animal Center, decided against taking in strays. And you probably all know the history of the county attempting, to come up with a county-wide solution to the problem of strays, and that worked for a little while and no longer works. And so what we have now is kind of a patchwork system where some of the municipalities have contracts with the Brandywine Valley SPCA to take in their strays. A couple municipalities have their own programs in place, and then some basically have nothing. And yeah, it's a really unfortunate situation where we've worked on other plans, we've tried to pull some things together, nothing has really quite fallen into place. I'm not aware of any plans that are in the works right now. And so, yeah, I'm not aware of anything that's in the works or, that is going to alleviate the situation at this time. So, like I said, I would encourage any municipality that doesn't have a contract with the Brandywine Valley SPCA to talk to, the BVSPCA. If you think you can't afford it, talk to them. Maybe they can be flexible, come up with something you can afford. It's a difficult situation, we know, but so talk to them, see if there's something they can come up with. Dean is here, Dean Fountain, talk to him, but don't just let it slide. See if you can come up with something that is affordable for your municipality. But the question was if there's any supplemental funding or some kind of subsidy available, and I'm sorry to say that no, there's not. I'm not aware of anything.
Thank you, Pat. Is the Animal Cruelty Code available on the Pennsylvania government website or elsewhere? And if not, where can it be located? You want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so my favorite website on the planet is the Pennsylvania legislative website, which is state.pa.us, or I'm sorry, legis, legis.state.pa.us, or from your mobile device, palegis.us. And it's got a ton of information on there, including the ability to log in and create tracking alerts directly to your email for any legislation that you're interested in, including Victoria's Law. So you can Google Pennsylvania House, Pennsylvania Senate, Pennsylvania General Assembly, all of that will get you to that website. That website also includes a complete compendium of all Pennsylvania law and statutes. So you can search for Act 10 of 2017, okay, Act 10 of 2017, or you can go to Title 18, Section 50, or Chapter 55, which is the Animal Cruelty Code, and you will see that there, and you can be ensured that it is the most recent edition of whatever law you are looking at. So there are a number of other websites that contain Libre's law and contain the Pennsylvania Animal Cruelty Code, but the most up-to-date and verifiable one will be the state legislative website.
I'm going to mention one other website as well, which is Humane PA. If you want to stay up to date on animal protection legislation specifically, they house all of the info there. They'll keep you updated on the status of the bills, and you can contact your legislators straight through their links. So Humane PA, if you just Google that, that is Pennsylvania's political voice for animals, and everyone in this room who cares and loves about animals, please follow that page.
So we've discussed legislative outreach as a critical way for the community to help. But how else can the community help? Other than the outreach, and I know that that's number one, and we all should do that, right? But what else? What else can the community do to assist with efforts to support protections for animals?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is always spaying and neutering. You know, most of us, I think, you know, probably everybody in this room is, you know, spays and neuters their pets. You know, there are still people out there though who don't. You know, and so, and again, people will listen to you where they might not listen to someone else, and really encourage people spay and neuter their pets. We have, well, the Spay Club, which is in Folsom. Wait, where's the Spay Club? Sharon Hill, which is wonderful. Okay, make sure people know about the Spay Club. You know, if they're afraid that they can't afford the cost of spay and neuter. We have occasional days where we'll take our, you know, truck into Chester or someplace like that. Keep an eye out for some things like that, but really encourage people to get their animals spayed and neutered. Another thing is, really, if you know anybody who's got this idea in their head that they're going to breed a dog, you know, please, you know, discourage that. My daughter's old boyfriend's brother, you know, he bought a blue pit and decided he was going to breed her, and then he was going to sell the puppies for $800 a piece. And you can imagine how successful that little venture was. And so he ended up with like 6 puppies that he had to get rid of. And it was, and you know, and I had told him, you're never going to be able to sell those puppies. Don't do it. But of course, you know, he knew everything. So, and that was a disaster, and it should have never happened. And, you know, so things like that, you know, if you know people who are going to take this unwise journey, you know, just talk to them about, you know, how important it is to spay and neuter their animals. Don't be a backyard breeder. I think that's a problem that we all see, and you know, it's just disastrous. So, if you could encourage that.
Okay.
You know, I reflect what I said earlier. When it comes down to enforcement, you see something that doesn't feel right, say something. If somebody, and it happens often enough, and this is not scolding or wagging a finger, but a lot of people call in and it's not a problem. We don't know it is or it isn't until we look into it. So anybody who thinks there's a problem is not a waste of time to contact the police department, your local humane agency, just to bounce off of fear that something might be happening, and then we'll look into it. So if we don't know, we can't do anything about it. So that's my suggestion on that. Oh, and on animal control things as well, I always like to say that rescuing an animal is a fantastic thing to do. And when it gets to your home, controlling the animal is important as well. So, you know, what you can also do is show your community what a rescue animal is like. You know, show them what it really
This is a rather specific question. So, is there anything in the Animal Welfare Code against releasing domestic doves, either white or ring-necked doves, at public events or events such as weddings?
So back to the weird stuff we didn't really know was in the animal cruelty code. Well, I knew, but a lot of other people didn't. There is a couple of, I think the only thing on there was interfering with the pigeons. Yeah, cruelty to cow to enhance the appearance of udder. Fun stuff in here. But yeah, I think there's nothing regarding that release, and generally those are owned animals, I believe. So it's because there are bans in most of the major cities, including New York City and Philadelphia, on netting pigeons, and pigeons are typically very difficult to breed. And remember, doves are just albino pigeons, so you can't breed them. So generally, if you have a flock of them or something like that, it's owned and it's maintained, and if they're released, then they're trained to come back. And it's illegal to bother them. As a good rule of thumb, though, that a lot of people don't realize, under Pennsylvania law, if you feed it, you own it. So if you say, okay, I'm just going to let the cat out today, technically you've abandoned that animal. So there have been prosecutions instituted for just releasing animals. So I think absent them being trained to come back, that might fall under this category if somebody really wanted to look into it. But on the other end of the spectrum, Pennsylvania has live pigeon shoots where birds are netted and then released and then shot into the ground, and that exists in this semi-legal, murky underworld.
Next question. Can you guys describe, so we've talked about the situation where there's enforcement comes in and there are animals that are taken into custody. But can you explain the time for the surrender process or the required transfer of ownership that occurs through the court process? Can you guys talk about that? Because I think that's something, the assumption is that as soon as you guys come in and see the animals, that you automatically have the right to have them, and that's not quite as simple. Can we talk about that a little bit?
So basically, the animals will get removed one of two ways. Either from the owner willingly surrendering the animal over to our possession and care, or through the use of the search warrant. Now, for option B, the search warrant, those animals are now, just like any other piece of evidence, continue to be owned by that individual until deemed to be found guilty, or that individual comes around and surrenders the animal over to us. Now, thankfully, we can use it as collateral to pay the restitutions that build if the cost of care petition works as planned. So the question on timelines is, it depends. So we've had dogs from dogfighting on the search warrant hold for over 2 years, because that's how long the court cases go. I currently still have several dogs on the search warrant that are now veering into month 5. And on one end, yes, the animals are not in the predicament or situations that we took them from, which is a step in the right direction. However, they get caught in what I refer to as limbo. So they're at a shelter. They really can only get the care that they need, meaning, we'll give them vaccinations because we have to. If they get hurt, we will help them. We cannot neuter them. We cannot generally put them out to foster. We cannot let them play in certain play groups all the time. It depends on the animal. It's their property. So there are certain rules or regulations that change the dynamic of the ownership of the animal in our care. And it can last a very long time. Going back to the cost of care petition, getting the definition that it has now, that has been crucial in kind of expediting the process of getting ownership of the animals. But there have been times where you get a search warrant, the individual disappears, and he's not showing up in court. It creates problems, and it can be a very lengthy, long process if you're not willingly signed over to it. So I will say that we do try not to forcefully remove the animal if we cannot. If we don't have to, but there are situations where we do, unfortunately. The animals continue to suffer the consequences for that.
And the idea I don't know if everybody's familiar with the cost of care petition, but the idea with the cost of care petition is more or less to force their hand, to say to people, okay, we're taking your dog, okay, because they usually are dogs, and we're going to take care of it, but we don't do that for free. We're not a free boarding facility. So you have to pay for the time that the dog is in our care, in our custody. And if it turns out to be years, you're going to pay for years of custody. And we charge, what is it, $150 a day or something? I forget. Because we charge for the initial veterinary.
There's a set, I believe it's $25 a day, $35 now. It will be medical costs as well. But
Yeah,
there is a
that's okay.
set fee for care of an estimated amount. The reality is, like Pat said, if it is 2 years,
It's
quite
2 years,
expensive,
it's
but
times the number of dogs,
it does help expedite the process in which we're not, waiting for restitutions, which is really a secondary focus, but we're not waiting for these animals to get a home and get the heck out of the same four walls that it's forced to stare at day in and day out while it's sitting on a search warrant hold, not being viewed by the public and really not getting the affection and attention granted by our staff, yes, but outside those walls, we can take it to the park.
Yeah, and the idea is really to kind of push them along and, have them make a decision, like, how much is this dog really worth to you? And we've had, a case where you hand somebody, they have 5 dogs and you hand them a bill for several $1,000s, and it's like, do you want to pay this bill or do you want to surrender the dog to us? Which do you want? And, they'll generally surrender the dog because they have to pay the bill within, like say 14 days, and then they get the bill for the next month, and then the next month, and the next month. And they have to keep paying every month or they are deemed to have surrendered the dog. So, and the idea was, frankly, to get dogs away from these fighting rings, get them away from them. It's like, like Hayden said, it's not always a perfect solution because some of these people have warrants out against them anyway. So they're not going to come and pay their bill because, they don't want to be anywhere near anybody. They just take off. And then we're kind of stuck, and the poor dog is in the, kind of the dog equivalent of an evidence locker, and, there's not much we can do, but, except take good care of them, but, they're still kind of in limbo. So we do what we can and take care of them and as best we can, but, the poor animal, they're stuck. So the law's not perfect, but it's better than what it was. That's for sure.
One last question, and it's kind of a fun question. So leave it on a positive note. And the laws in Delaware allow pets in stores, restaurants. Is there any movement in Pennsylvania in the Commonwealth to allow for pets to be in stores and that to be allowed?
There is one bill. And actually, Sarah probably could be losing more on this, but I did a press event on our Animals in Distress bill, which is our new hot car law, which grants civil immunity to public safety professionals to enter a vehicle and remove a dog or cat in distress. So we just finished up a press event. I had my dog there, and the only reason I had my dog there is that he was living in Libre's shadow for so long that I finally said, Chewy, you're coming to the Capitol with me. So he was with me that day, and I went to a restaurant, and he said, I'm sorry, you can't have your pet here. And I was like, what do you mean you can't? It's a patio. And that's when I realized Pennsylvania law, you can't have pets at restaurants. So Representative Justin Simmons is from Berks County area. He has introduced a bill that would allow pets to be on patios of restaurants at the discretion of the owner. But that has not moved yet, but there is a bill that would allow for that. Not stores, it would be restaurants specific.
Restaurant specific.
So for background, back under the category of look how far we've come. In 2008, when we were doing the dog law overhaul, we tried to bring a puppy mill survivor to the Capitol for part of a testimony, and we got turned away by security. We weren't allowed to bring animals into the Capitol at all. Now Kristen just walks down the hallway, and Representative Simmons when he was a freshman, his very first year, he wanted to do a resolution encouraging employers to have dogs at work policies. Like, so non-binding, it's a resolution. It's just a happy, feel good. And then we're going to talk about the manual that there is that HSUS has on implementing good policies for dogs at work and encourage this. It got shot down by Kerry Golden, the executive director of the Agriculture Committee, who came in and told him absolutely not. We can't do that. We can never have dogs in the Capitol. It's too much of a problem. And even encouraging other employers to do it, we'd be hypocrites because we don't allow them in the Capitol. So now we have, let's see, Representative Sims brings his dog to the Capitol. Representative Ferry brings his dog to the Capitol. We have multiple service animals. Andy Dinneman brings his dog to the Capitol. Kristen always has a dog at the Capitol. We still have not gotten that resolution, but I was unaware that there was a ban on actually having them on patios. I didn't know that that was the case. But I'm sure if all of those dog-owning renegades in the Capitol put their heads together, that they'll get the bill moving.
Yeah. Maybe we started something here today, right? It's live streaming, so maybe it'll go out there to more people as well. Sure.
I should have done this earlier. We have another organization here with us today, and I feel I've been remiss in not introducing the executive director. Amanda Twyman is here. She's from the Federated Humane Societies of Pennsylvania. She's their executive director. It's a very good organization. If you're with a Humane Society, or I guess law enforcement organizations too, right? It occurs to me when people were asking about where can we find the text of the bill, I think you maintain that on your website, right? It was a PAFederatedHumane.org. So, and if you want to stand up, Amanda, yeah, if I can make you do that. Amanda, she's their new executive director, and it's, taken a statewide look at a lot of issues that really need to be looked at. So I encourage you to look at PAFederatedHumane.org. And, Amanda may be able to help you out, and you might want to join the organization. It costs like virtually nothing. So, encourage you to look at it. And they also offer a lot of good training and workshops and stuff like that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, today. I want to thank the panel, our earlier speakers. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for protecting Pennsylvania pets and all that you do. I can't thank you enough for that. So everyone, remember to make sure you get your CLE credits and everything taken care of on the way out, okay? Thank you, guys. Please.